Hi there, I'm Brianna, an international relations student from Universitas Indonesia. I'm also currently one of the interning researchers at SASA this summer. And today I want to talk about the role of ancient studies in international relations. So, welcome to Where the Past Meets the Future, Part 2. In the second part, I will talk more about how we can develop ancient studies in international relations. So, let's get started. As stated in the previous video, there are many similar elements that international relations and ancient studies share. I will highlight three main similarities that one can find in most cases. First is history, in which both subjects analyze past events for the reference, ideas, and overall study. The realm of ancient studies is simply ancient, meaning every core objective in the subject is extracted from periods that are antiquated. International relations, in return, is a subject that tries to predict what happens next in the international stage by following patterns and tendencies drafted from the past. It is almost impossible to create an IR research without referencing something that has historical elements. Sadly, the history that IR tends to go back to usually stops at the beginning of the industrial age, meaning it rarely touches anything ancient or, the genesis of political ideas that IR uses. This goes to our second similarity, which is society and civilization. Ancient studies encapsulates knowledges regarding ancient civilization, region, language, and literature. They learn anything and everything about past societies, whether it be political, cultural, or economic needs. In IR, scholars learn more about political aspects of society as they study civilization and societies to understand why certain policies and political events came to happen. With that being said, ancient studies can help IR in learning about civilizations from certain periods of time and needs. This would be a wonderful way to compare past and present civilizations, hence enriching research that needs more of a historical and in-depth approach. Lastly, as explained in the previous video, cultural heritage becomes the champion of both ancient studies and IR. Due to its physical and tangible dimensions, it becomes easier for scholars from both fields to utilize them directly. Another thing to remember is that IR is a general, young, and interdisciplinary subject that is constantly evolving. This means that there are many spaces in IR that still needs answering from other subjects that are more mature. In a way, this could be an entryway for ancient studies to be more relevant in subjects that are considered modern and contemporary. An entryway for ancient studies in IR can be through the transnational studies stream of IR. Transnational studies is a realm of IR that's core focus is not on state security or economics, rather more towards the livelihoods of people, human rights, and the global society of the world. Transnational studies believe that in a globalized world, states are no longer the sole owner of authority and power in global politics. Rather, people and non-state actors such as multinational corporations, non-governmental organizations, and individual characters can have a say in the global agenda, though not as impactful as the conventional state. Transnational studies generally want to know about the characters and the building blocks of society, hence making their scholars reach out to subjects in a much more humane and interpersonal approach. Through a substantive perspective, ancient studies' role in identity studies can help it thrive in the transnational studies realm. For example, reflecting to Abd El Gawad's presentation at SASA's opening the Ancient World virtual conference. Ancient studies can be used to promote anti-imperialist and anti-racist remarks, social justice, and basic human rights values within the global structure. Through transnational studies and its post-colonialism concepts, issues like the toxic romanticization of ancient Egypt can be dug deeper. Subtopics such as human rights and anti-colonialism and transnational justice could be used to create a more engaging and persuasive campaign for a better representation of Egypt, both ancient and modern. Next, let's talk about ancient studies' importance in IR. In this section, I'll talk about the two major contributions, one to IR's context and study of culture, and another regarding the student's education and sense of belonging. Ancient studies contribute to the learning of a country's cultural and societal context. This comes from the regional aspect of transnational studies, where IR scholars learn about the people, culture, and overall society of a certain region. To properly learn about a particular region, then one must also understand the historical context and cultural values that are already ingrained within the society. Through ancient studies, it will be easier for IR students to understand the internal conflicts and decision-making process of a certain country. This understanding can also help in promoting a sense of belonging amongst communities. The thing about IR is that the subject scope is very, very wide. In order to do research, students would only take bits of information from numerous studies, not bothering to deeply comprehend the core of what they are actually studying. In the case of IR schools in Indonesia, it is not recommended to dive too deep into learning about a region, as students are encouraged to learn more about concepts and theories that can later be applied to all regions of the world. This is a pretty risky take on the study, as in terms of identity and being a future diplomat, it is very important for students to take notice of society's elements. How can they properly be a servant for the public, for both their host and home country should they become a diplomat, if they do not know who they are serving? With that being said, ancient studies can be introduced to promote and strengthen regional studies in IR curricula. By learning the ancient history of a certain region, students can have a more empathetic approach when researching a certain country. As students know where certain cultures, beliefs, and values originate from, they will also start to see the world through the beholder's perspectives. Hence, this can help rationalize policy choices that IR students constantly dissect. Along with the new way of understanding perspectives, learning ancient studies can also help create a sense of belonging within the student toward their region. This is particularly important for areas that try to promote regional identity and cohesion among its citizens, like ASEAN, the European Union, etc. By learning about their countries and neighboring countries, ancient history and past, then the students can find themselves seeing red lines and similarities between the countries' past. And this will actually create a new shared history, hence becoming a solid foundation for these senses of belonging and regionalism from the bottom up. Next up, I will discuss a little bit about the direct application of this subject integration. And as I am an international relations student here in Indonesia, allow me to use Indonesia as an example. In Indonesia, our IR programs have great potential to actually integrate some lessons from ancient studies. To start off, Indonesia is a country that is very rich in history and cultural heritage. Indonesia has many ancient history to uncover that can help in learning more about interstate relations and the way we view politics from time to time. Should Indonesian IR scholars learn about ancient history of nearby countries, then Indonesian IR scholars can also discover more about the similarities and differences between IR in Indonesia and the overall relationship between Indonesia and the subject country. This is important in terms of building regional alliance and shared identity. Along with that, scholars and students alike can understand more regarding the reasonings behind certain foreign policies that are based on a country's ingrained values and history. For example, IR scholars who are trying to decipher China's decision-making process amid the regional contestation for the South China Sea can see how China uses much of its ancient philosophy in the state's international strategies. Ideas from Confucius, Zhuangzi, and Guangzhong littered China's military strategies, and it definitely would be difficult to understand why certain maneuvers are taken if the scholar does not have a solid base of understanding in ancient Chinese philosophy before analyzing the cases. Sadly, the IR programs in Indonesia have not catered to the study of ancient history or history in general at that. Of the five major IR schools here, the role of ancient history is almost non-existent. History classes only limit themselves to talking of events during and after the world wars. When it comes to Indonesia's history, the schools also limit the time frame to during Indonesia's fight for independence. Courses about culture and identity of certain societies are also very limited. Some only opting to talk about the political scene and nation building process of certain countries. Should IR students really want to learn about ancient history, they can opt for two approaches. One, they can enroll in the classes offered by the archaeology and history department of their universities. However, the problem is that not all IR programs in Indonesia actually allow their students to learn non-IR or social sciences courses. Second, they can try to join public classes and workshops regarding history. Sadly, these events are mostly hosted by foreign communities and NGOs. We are all for learning and about various cultural diversity and making knowledge accessible to everyone. However, when it comes to history, particularly those that intersect with colonialism, the subject becomes quite sensitive. In Indonesia, the two bodies that constantly host events regarding history are Institut Français d'Indonésie, pioneered by the French embassy in Jakarta, and also the Indonesian Heritage Society, an organization that the majority of its members are on guest lectures are actually Dutch. The idea that ex-colonizer countries are the ones teaching ex-colonies about their own history is undoubtedly pretty sensitive. However, Indonesian bodies are still unable to create something that is enticing and recurring, open lectures of that sort. And with so, there is really little choice left offered to IR students and the public alike when it comes to learning about history. The reality that foreigners are the one talking over the local history narrative showcases how exactly it is needed for IR to decolonize ancient studies and how Indonesians have to take ancient studies more seriously. Next, we talk about potential cases. Indonesia is one of the many examples of countries where there is untapped potential for the ancient studies to collaborate with IR. Within the domestic scope, Indonesia can use the integration of international relations and ancient studies to help champion the conversion of the Candi Prambanan Temple in central Java into a hybrid heritage system. The system means that no longer would just be a tourist site, rather also a religious building, true to its antique use from the 8th century. As the Indonesian government would like to make the Candi as one of the biggest Hindu sites in the world, IR factors come to play in terms of reducing identity tensions as well as promoting the idea in the international field. In regards to regional matters, learning Asian studies and international relations can help diplomats build the regional identity of ASEAN. As hinted by the name, the Association for Southeast Asian Nations aims to cement good cooperation and brotherhood amongst the 10 member states. One of their main foundations is the socio-cultural aspect of the SEA societies. However, despite having so many similarities with one another due to acculturation and migration, the manifestation of a shared identity is almost non-existent. By looking back to the history that builds up ASEAN, it could be possible for us to find shared historical elements among the 10 countries and then using said arguments to build social integration. IR's focus on the historical societal aspect of ASEAN could also catalyze the rise of subjects regarding Asian countries' history, something that we have not seen here in Indonesia and most ASEAN countries, which also is one of the reasons why it's difficult to create a bottom-up approach of social integration in this region. Lastly, by integrating IR and ancient studies, scholars and diplomats can try to fix the current reality of UNESCO, in which most of the nomination process in terms of UNESCO World Heritage is still very political and monetary in nature. By internalizing the importance of culture and heritage value, perhaps we can finally give way for developing countries to truly showcase their history and identity and to make sure that not only developed countries actually gain World Heritage titles in their cultural sites. In conclusion, in a sense, the current usage of ancient studies in IR is not entirely positive in connotation. There has to be efforts to develop a more positive role of ancient studies in IR. Ancient studies can help IR in two things. One being in developing a more sensitive IR program that not only cares about the interests of a country, rather also its people, which will then help bring us to number two, which is help scholars understand more of themselves and other countries, hence catering to a more amicable bilateral and multilateral relations of countries. In return, the rising popularity of IR can help increase the awareness of students on how ancient studies is a subject that is not just interesting and dynamic, but also relevant to IR career and current reality of society. With that, the trend of commodifying and using cultural heritage being as a tool, IR can start to see ancient studies as a subject with values that can help in the development of global politics and relationship. And so with that, I hope that this video can help you catch a glimpse of the importance of ancient studies in international relations, as well as champion the process of restarting the spark to learn ancient studies. Thank you.